Christian parenting.
Where do you turn when life turns upside down?
Is there hope for the hurting? Can we find joy in the sorrow?
This is the Life Upside Down podcast with Abel Speaks, and we're your hosts, Daniel and Kelly Crawford.
Let's jump into today's episode. All right, episode 2, Life Upside Down podcast.
Coming at ya.
We're back, Daniel and Kelly Crawford. Kelly has some big news, really a first. And so we put together a little siblings and spouses league, and Kelly has a fantasy football team, don't you, Kel?
First time in history.
You want to tell them about your team? What's it called?
I picked the name Minivan Mojo.
Ooh.
Actually, Daniel kind of picked it.
Well,
but we recently got a minivan, which I love. It's very functional.
It's very functional. How'd you pick your team, too?
Daniel gave me some recommendations of like 2 or 3 people, and then I just looked at their face, decided if they had a nice face or a not nice face, and welcoming, face.
Sure.
Where
fun
they play.
Names. Yeah.
And then, fun names, and then just narrowed it down like that.
Yeah. So you're going to be drawn to a Juju Smith-Schuster.
He is on my team.
How many Jujus you know?
He's the first.
Yep. And so I went with the Daniel Tigers. That's
because
my team
we have
name.
children.
Because I wanted
clearly
to
minivans and Daniel Tigers.
Yeah, I wanted to enlist the support of my children because we're going to play each other this season, just so you know.
Yes.
So that sums up our meaningless chatter of the first 90 seconds of this podcast, and to move into where we're going today. But before we jump into introducing you to our friends, just to reintroduce you to us and to this podcast, we're Daniel and Kelly Crawford, co-founders of Abel Speaks, and starting this podcast in partnership with Christian parenting, with really a vision that mirrors that of Abel Speaks, which is that every parent and every person can have joy and hope even in the midst of sorrow and hardship. And so as we do that in these first string of episodes, we're just going to start to walk through some of those big questions that any person has to wrestle through at a head level and at a heart level when life turns upside down. And so one of the main vehicles that we hope to explore those questions is just through authentic personal stories from real people. Last week, we started off by just sharing a little bit of our story that you can listen back to in episode 1 if you would like. And then this week, we get to hear from our friends Brett and Chrissy Billman. And so just a little bit about Brett and Chrissy. Brett has been the director of finance and HR at Watermark Church in Dallas since 2014. Chrissy stays at home with their 3 amazing kids, Landry, Colson, and Ellie. And so, Brett and Chrissy Billman, thanks for being on the Life Upside Down podcast, baby.
Thanks for having us.
Come on.
It's fun to be here.
And so, we're excited for you guys to get to know them and hear some of their story today.
Would you guys just share a little bit about your backstory, how you guys met, about your family, let everybody get to know you a little bit?
Yeah. So fun. So we met in 4th grade. Obviously, I had an immediate attraction to this gal right here.
Even as a 4th grader.
Even as a 4th grader.
Special.
Absolutely. So 5th grade, the natural thing to do is on Valentine's Day, I took chocolates and put it in her cubby in homeroom, which started, and she had no idea who I was. Like, she even laughs now. Like, she had no clue who I was. But I knew who she was. So started the pursuit. Then later on, high school, finally tricked her into dating me, which was tons of fun. Chased her for about a year, actually. Funny enough, this will lead into part of our story, but I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in high school, and that's what it took for her to notice me. She felt sorry for me.
Wow.
So she went on a date.
She loves a man with some insulin.
That's right.
Not true.
So here we are. And I always say, if it took getting diabetes to get my wife, well worth it.
That's
Sympathy
right.
date that turned into
Here we are.
now being married for 10 years. And it has been fun and a wild ride. So that's kind of where we've been at for 17 years. ago, you said yes to going on a date.
Did you guys follow each other through college as well?
We did. We had a year there where we between our senior and freshman year.
I thought we ignored that.
Yeah,
year.
yeah. Yeah,
We ignored
It
that
was
year.
a dark year.
Yes.
We had a little stint there where we were friends that still kind of remained super close.
Yeah.
And then we started dating after Christmas of our freshman year in college.
Where at?
And continued. We went to Baylor University.
You followed me there.
I did.
Yes, you did.
Well, it all panned out.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it
It
did.
worked out.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Well, as you kind of mentioned, you guys have walked through some hard roads and hard seasons. And so do you guys just want to share a little bit how that started? You mentioned the type 1 diabetes and then what it looks like up to kind of current day.
Yeah. So, like I said, high school, had never heard of diabetes before, started some crazy symptoms, went to the doctor, and at 17 was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's a chronic illness that has no cure, that I will have until the day I die. And so I've got to have insulin in me all the time. So every time I eat something, I've got to be conscious of it, checking my blood sugar constantly. I mean, it is something I can never get away from, for the rest of my life. And so it is just part of me now and has been for 17 years.
And then right before we got married, about a month before, I started having just really bad symptoms, sudden weight loss, and through multiple tests found out that I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease a week before our wedding. And so walked down that aisle, can barely remember any of it. It felt so horrible. Our honeymoon was kind of a hot mess because I was so sick the whole time. That's kind of how we started our relationship.
Yeah.
And so it was literally in sickness and in health. And that was something that we really got familiar with as soon as we got married, which I feel like a lot of newlyweds get some time before all that hits, but
Yeah.
not us.
Yeah.
It was great.
So Crohn's disease for you, another chronic illness, so we both have autoimmune disorders that are going to be with us until the day we die, or pray that they find a cure would be awesome. But so that's where we're at. So got married, both having chronic illnesses, got pregnant for the first time, which was so much fun, elated, quickly found out at 8 weeks along that we had miscarried. So we lost our first. And I remember having that question and thought, like, is it irresponsible for two chronically ill people to be trying to get pregnant? So we wrestled through that for a little while, talked to doctors who all said, hey, that is not something you should expect to have consistently because of your illnesses. So keep going, keep trying, which we did. Got pregnant again. You were so sick during that pregnancy. I mean, for 40 weeks. This wasn't like, some morning sickness. I mean, she was pushing an IV pole around our house because she didn't have enough fluids in her. She was throwing up so much every single
No
day.
trimesters
The whole time.
off.
Yeah, none. 40
Wow.
weeks
Good
of
grief.
basically vomiting multiple times a day.
Mm-hmm.
Working with a pump that had anti-nausea medicine going into you all the time, with a trash can under your desk.
Mhm.
That's how we got through 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
But Landry came out 7.5 years ago, and you were
It felt great. It
Perfectly
was,
fine.
Yep, all went away, which we were super, super thankful for. So then we decided a year and a half, when she was a year and a half, we would, let's do this again. Like maybe I won't be as sick the second time.
Yep.
And so got pregnant with our son and just started having some of the similar symptoms and then some that just weren't the same. And so we just chalked it up to, I don't handle babies well. My body just rejects them. They do great, but mama doesn't do great. And so we even went to an adoption class while I was pregnant with him going, we're 2 and done.
Yeah.
Let's look at other options of how to grow our family.
Mm-hmm.
But headaches, I had headaches with Coulson early on in the teen weeks, and then the continued vomiting. And then around 30 weeks, I started noticing that my vision wasn't right. And so kept thinking, it's hormones, it's all it's all the things that the babies do to your body. And so went to 2 doctors, ENTs, thinking this is vertigo that's induced by hormones. And so by the second doctor, he was kind of looked at me and nodded and went, is your OB tracking with you? And so at that time I'd already had 2 hospitalizations to get fluids. And so I was actually on my way after seeing him to go for my 3rd hospitalization to get more fluids because I just couldn't keep anything down. And
So at that point, your doctor just said, hey, this is not okay. You're not well. You were 34 weeks along. And she said, hey, we need to spend a week just figuring this out and to know what's going on. So spent 4 days running through every kind of test. Everything came back normal. You were totally fine. And finally, your doc, your OB, said, hey, let's just do a quick scan of your brain, see if something weird is going on there. I'm sure it's fine, but gosh, then I guess I'll send you home and we'll just say pregnancies don't agree with you.
Yep.
So I had been at the hospital all week. She sends me to work. Just like, hey, this is going to come up negative. It's not going to have anything. I'll call you when I'm on the curb. You can swing by, pick me up, and we'll go home and deal with this. And so I'm sitting there at work when I get a text message, and all it says is, come back now. I have a brain tumor. Man. And, first you look at it, you're like, oh, that's the worst autocorrect ever. So I called her, and she picked up the phone, and I immediately knew our lives were going to be changed. So in that moment, you're realizing my wife has a brain tumor. We get more tests, hoping, okay, maybe it's just one of these weird little ones. And you hear about all these different kinds of brain tumors, and with medication, they go away. Come to find out hers is the size of a tennis ball in the back of her head that is pushing on her spine. And it is causing so much pain and damage that we had two options. Your doctor presented with two options. You can either leave it in and die or take it out. So over the next 10 days, things went from really bad to even worse. Collapsing in my arms, unconscious, emergency surgery to remove the tumor. We had an emergency C-section at that time. Colson, our son, was totally fine. Praise God, but you were not. And I remember sitting in the hospital, holding my wife's hand as she's unconscious, just praying, Lord, let this be done. I'm tired of this. I want to quit. Haven't we gone through enough already? I think that was one of the things I struggled with a lot and still do. It was like, when do we get to say enough? So that was 2015, 2 brain surgeries. So 1 brain surgery, she was okay, went home and was recovering, only to find out that the glue that they didn't use to close your skull had gotten infected. So went back in for a, quote, routine surgery, and that ended even worse than the first. Spent more days in the ICU recovering. You almost died again from fluid on your brain, and went home that summer of 2015. Again, by the grace of God, no brain issues since. It's been awesome and great. But yeah, our life for a while there was just completely upside down.
It was 9 months, almost to the day after my second surgery, that Brett started complaining of back pain and got a bad tummy bug and having type 1 diabetes. He was so out of it. I called his doctor and said, listen, we're scared about his blood sugar. What do you want us to do? And he said, why don't you bring him in? Let's get him fluids. Let's just keep him stabilized. So we went into the ER. This was February of 16. And they drew some blood, tried to get him to stop vomiting. And they came back in and they go, well, you're in active kidney failure. Your kidneys are failing. And so it was that moment that I went, no, you're joking, right? Like, we're 20, he was 29 at the time, I was 28. Like, we're too young for 2 brain surgeries and now kidney failure. But sure enough, we were admitted and he was continuing to really struggle. And you could tell he was not doing well. And so through a couple of days of just waiting to see if his kidneys would turn back on, they wouldn't. They continued to not work. And so he ended up on dialysis. And so again, we were sitting in the hospital and my turn to be on this side of the bed, right? Yeah. And so just kind of crying out to the Lord again, saying, I think the quote that we say a lot is like, haven't we met our quota? Haven't you given us enough? Like, have we learned enough? Right? Yeah.
We got it.
Yeah. Put it on somebody else next time. Okay. And just being reminded, like, that's not how the Lord works. Right. And so, thankfully, Brett only had to go through 1 round of dialysis, and sure enough, it just helped give his kidneys a break, and they started working again. So, we were super, super thankful for that. He's never had kidney issues since. It was such a weird fluke issue, that we're super thankful for. So
that was 2016. 2017, got pregnant for the third time, which was awesome. You were still sick, but manageable. Went in to get to find out the gender of the kid, got the blood test, and got a call back from our doctor letting us know that we had a little girl. However, she had something called Turner syndrome. And gosh, I remember you were out of town. You're
I was in California,
on vacation
on a girls' trip.
And I remember going up to our bedroom, putting our 2 kids down. I laid on the ground, face down, screaming, punching the floor. And again, was just like, what in the world? Why us? Gosh, that was such a hard night. Come to find out, not long after that it was a false positive. So Ellie does not have Turner syndrome. And she is now 2.5, extraordinarily healthy. Everything looks good. And doing well there. That's her. 2019, you're hospitalized again for Crohn's stuff going on. Your body's not reacting well last November. And for the last 11 months, I mean, this is kind of what we're bringing you guys up to speed now. 11 months, lots of tests, lots of specialists, and your joints are still swelling.
So what the hospitalization looked like was what put us there was finally me looking at Brett after putting the kids down to bed and saying, I can't even walk. Like, I hurt so badly, and it's every part of my body. It's, I mean, from head to toe, literally everything hurts all the time. And so that bought me 3 days in the hospital, them thinking it was Crohn's disease. Oh, this was just a fallout from Crohn's. And then everything kind of kept going, and nothing resolved to the point where just last week, they finally were able to diagnose me with lupus. And so while there was some joy in finally getting an answer after 10 months of being in pain, there's also just that feeling of, are you kidding me? Like, here we go again. It's just one more thing that we have to deal with in our lives that we feel like, honestly, at times nobody else has to deal with. And so just trying to figure out and see the Lord through all of this can sometimes just be really challenging.
Yeah.
So
can you guys speak to a little bit of just how you navigate that thought of just like, I'm looking around and my peers are not walking the same road that I am? Like, how do you guys navigate the emotions that can come with that, the frustration, the comparison, all of those things?
I think for me, a big one is talking about it is super helpful, and being able to share with close friends that understand what we're walking through, that understand my heart, that my heart isn't to say God isn't good, but that will look at me and go, you're right, life sucks. Like, it just does. And that's okay. I also was reading just the other day in Psalms just how it was great, because it was like, Lord, why have you forgotten me? And sometimes I go, yeah, Lord, why have you forgotten me? And then it's just that next verse is, I will remember the deeds of your past, and like of the past. And so just that reminder too of me of like, there are times where I am going to feel forgotten, or why is this happening to me? But then to be able to take a step back and look. So that's usually helpful for me.
Man, so really in the span of, I mean, y'all are in your mid-30s, in the span of a 5 to 10 year stretch, I mean, I heard type 1 diabetes, I heard Crohn's, I heard lupus, I heard brain tumors, brain surgery, kidney failure, life-limiting diagnoses in a pregnancy. And so just this list of things that, man, even to just have one or two of those over the course of a lifetime is like a weighty thing. And so in the midst of almost an overwhelming amount of just medical, physical health challenges, it almost sounds flippant to ask, like, what's the hardest part been? I assume it's been, to some degree, physical pain and discomfort would be an answer. And so in addition to that, just on, as you know, you even just started to speak to, Chrissy, just spiritually, emotionally, personally, you know, what have been just some of the hardest parts of the journey to date that you guys are still very much in the midst of?
For me, it just feels like a daily grind. That's the hardest part. You know, it spikes, and brain tumors are really hard. New diagnoses are really hard. But, you know, every day, like, we wake up and have issues we've got to deal with. Like walking into the podcast studio right now, I have to be thoughtful about, okay, what's my blood sugar? Is it going to go low in a little bit? How much insulin do I have on board? Because if I go low during a podcast, we've got to scrap this thing because I'm just going to be slurring and not making sense. And most of the time I can have a good attitude about it, but sometimes that just sucks.
Yeah.
Like, no, not many other people have to be thinking about every little move. Okay, well, if I'm going to be here, how far away am I from sugar at all times? When am I going to eat? How many carbs does that have? That's not something most of my peers have to think about.
Yeah.
And I would love to be able to sit here and say, like, oh, the goodness of God is just constantly on my mind. There are days it does suck. And having friends, Chris alluded to this, having friends that allow you to say that without trying to jump in and correct your theology or immediately like, oh, but God is good. Then we'll just sit with you and say, like, yeah, gosh, that stinks. It's so good. It is so good to have those people around you, because there are plenty of days that I don't feel like I can go on, and I don't have to, because there are other people lifting me up consistently in my life.
I think for me, being a mother of 3 very young, very energetic children, sometimes it's really hard for me to not compare myself to other moms. And so just having that moment where I go, I'm too tired, or I don't feel well, or my joints hurt too much. I can't play this with you, even though that's what probably normal moms are doing. And so that seems to be one of the biggest struggles that I face right now, just being young and having young children. And so just being reminded that I'm not quote unquote normal, and I don't live a quote unquote normal life. And so just trying to wrestle with the Lord on, hey, what is this doing to my children? This isn't just affecting me anymore. It's affecting those that are so important around me. I was thinking about it just today. My youngest pulled out one of my medications out of my purse, and she goes, "What's this?" And I said, "It's mommy's medicine." And I kind of thought to myself, I go, how many times do I say that's mommy's medicine? That's mommy's medicine. And so how, a lot of parents, they take Tylenol or Motrin, and that's mommy's medicine, and they see it, once a month, kind of deal. And so just how different that is, and how that is also affecting my little people.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
With a lot of the families that we walk with that have older kids, they process when they have a pregnancy and a baby with a life-limiting diagnosis, like, how is this going to affect our kiddos? And, we didn't have older kids before. Obviously, we had Abel, so that wasn't a part of our journey. But it's been so sweet and encouraging just to see, I think as parents, we want to shield our kids from hardship, which is like a natural, normal desire. But just to see how resilient kids are, and I think it's cool to get to see like the actual childlike faith, through hardship with kids, but also to see how more empathetic they are when they see someone suffering or hurting. They have a real tangible understanding of like, oh, I've seen my parents walk through something that's really hard, and have more tools in my toolbox, even as a little kid, to be able to empathize with someone else. So I think as parents, that's something we talk about too with our kids sometimes, and just to encourage you guys. Yeah. Because it really, I think, does our kids go through suffering too, and it gives them tools to walk through the next season of suffering, but also to empathize with those around them.
And so without, while resisting the urge to sprint to the, so let's tie a sweet bow on it, and, tell us all the ways that God's good and it's all good. How have you guys also seen over this same stretch, how has a journey of suffering, how has it sanctified you in different ways? What are things that, in a way that we probably wouldn't have gravitated toward or like raise our hand for, what are ways that God has revealed himself to you, that he has taught you, reflections, takeaways, lessons over this time, whether that's about God, about yourselves, just about anything, that, hey, this is really, really hard, and I wouldn't wish this upon anybody else or myself, but in the midst of that, here's some things that really I've taken away that I wouldn't have otherwise taken away.
Yeah. Gives us a really clear understanding of the gospel. So some of our friends recently even just looked at us and said, man, Brett, Chris, I think y'all understand the gospel better than I do. What our friends said was, it's really easy for me to look at this world and find my hope in this world because it's comfortable. It's relatively easy and things are nice. And so I find myself even thinking about eternity and heaven and thinking, I don't know if I'm ready for that. But I
I
mean,
am.
yeah, we are.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, not in a morbid way. Man, we are ready. We are ready to go be a place where there is no more suffering or mourning or crying or pain. We're ready for the old things to pass away. Not to say that we're trying to run to that or get away from this life, but we, for sure, do not find our hope here in this world, which can be a benefit.
Yeah. It's a huge gift, I think.
That'll preach.
Yeah. I mean, I think is a takeaway for us too, just through suffering, is like, man, I long for heaven in a totally new way. And I was probably more like your friend prior to getting pregnant with Abel, where I'm like, I mean, this life's pretty good, and I mean, I want to have some kids, I want to have some grandkids, and then I'll be ready. And today I'm like, where were you yesterday? Like, I am ready for
Let's
Christ's
go.
return.
Come on back.
So I do. That resonates with me a lot too.
Yep.
Yeah. I think for both of us too, as well. When brain tumor hit, it was pretty easy to let other people in and help us. And we had people doing our lawn and doing our laundry and food and, you name it, taking our kids. And we thought, thank you, Lord, for the hands and feet of Jesus. But as this journey continues, we find it really hard to raise our hand for help again, even though we a lot of the times need it. And so that's something that we battle a lot with is one, turning to Lord in our weakness, knowing that He is our strength, and admitting that I'm weak and that I can't do it all. I can't be super mom all the time. I can't be the fun mom, and the Lord has got to come and provide for me in those ways on a daily basis. And then also just letting other people in when they say, hey, can I bring you a meal? And so saying, no, I got it. And thinking, this would be a blessing for me, is letting people in and letting people come and walk alongside of us.
Yeah.
And so trying to doing this independently has been a big thing, especially as it's a continued journey and not just a one-time event.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's huge in terms of just it's the air we breathe culturally is like we love being able to kind of self-sustain, self-reliance, independence. And it can be seen as weak or, a shot to the pride, whatever it is, to have to need people and rely upon people. And so, again, it doesn't make the circumstances enjoyable per se or pleasant, but some of those byproducts, whether it is just having a super loose grip on this world and longing for the world to come, or whether it's being almost forced to open up and say, I need help, I need other people. Man, those are fringe benefits that don't always feel that way.
And I think just like the vulnerability that it takes to like share honestly, like we need help, I think is it's like humbling, but also I think just opens this up to be more raw and vulnerable with the Lord too. And so I think it is a hard-earned gift, but still a gift nonetheless. So, well, where are you guys kind of at today in terms of how are we like on steady ground with all the different diagnoses, or is it feeling rocky, or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, so we finally got the lupus diagnosis just last week. And so as I was walking in here, getting a phone call from the doctor going, hey, do you have my meds in yet? And so Brett mentioned it before we started, just, healthcare moves at the pace of which you push it. And so it's so true. And so he and I talk about it and we joke because we have to find the humor in the day-to-day sometimes. But the joke is like, this is truly a part-time job for me, just trying to manage doctors and medications 100%. and getting everybody on the same page and all the things. And so, we're still in the thick of it. We are still in the middle of it. I still have people, bringing me lunches or coffee, knowing that I'm fatigued or that time is just not there when it comes to having to deal with all the things and be a full-time mom to 3 kids. So that's just where we are right now. I mean, we're still chugging along through all of this.
Yeah. And for me, sharing authentically, like I'm tired. It's not lack of sleep. I'm tired of, for the last 10 months, watching my wife hobble and cripple up and down stairs and not being able to make it at times. It's exhausting. It takes such a toll. So hopeful that there is medicine that will help. But 10 months of this, I'm exhausted. So that's where I'm at today.
And I think it's super powerful, the reminder of, hey, this is unresolved. Like, this isn't a hey, this happened in retrospect. And I mean, there are elements of your stories that are now past events that you look back on. But the season as a whole, you guys are still very much in the middle of it. And so without having to feel like, hey, we have reached a point of resolution, here's how we pretty this whole thing up, and, how it all comes together for a happy ending, is just like, man, we're not there. We got more questions than answers.
Yep.
And so even in the midst of that, to just start to wrap up, what is really one thing for you guys that has helped you guys up to this moment here and now, really maintain perspective on this journey?
For me, a friend shared with me during hospitalization of sitting in the hospital with my wife, just the simple, really easy verse, Psalm 3:5. It says, I lie down and sleep, I wake again because the Lord sustains me. And, chronic illness of like day in, day out. If I sit there and think about all the things, even just for my own health, not even including my wife, it's debilitating. It is tough to get out of bed in the mornings thinking about all the variables I have to think through and all the things that could happen or might happen. I wouldn't be able to make it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I just rest on that truth a lot, is I'm going to lie down and sleep. Not because I'm, so rested and peaceful, but because I have hope. Mm-hmm. I wake again because the Lord sustains me. Only through him sustaining me am I going to be able to make it through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So that's for me is kind of my daily go-to.
Amen.
Yeah. A verse that constantly comes to mind, especially when I'm tired or when I'm in pain, I think is the big one, is 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18 says, therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. And until I had pain or chronic illness or anything like that whole outwardly we're wasting away, like I'm young, I'm not wasting away, I'm in the prime of my life kind of deal. And to be confronted with the fact that at 33 years old, I am wasting away, and I'm wasting away before the rest of my peers. And so, just being reminded that even though it doesn't feel like a momentary affliction or trouble, that it truly is, and that there's something so much greater to look forward to. And like what Brett was saying earlier about just understanding the gospel so much more. I mean, I've never longed for heaven more in my life than I do today. And each day that as chronic illness continues, it's like that much more. I just want it, and I want to be with him, and I want everything to be new again. And so thankful for that, in that sense that I'm not so comfortable here. I'm able to see eternal perspective, but it still is that it's still momentary troubles.
Yeah.
So
that's like one of our favorite verse too, and the one that we clung to during our season with Abel and turn to often now as well. Brett, you kind of mentioned it, but do you guys find that it's like freeing to kind of be forced to live in like one day at a time and rely on the Lord?
Yes.
Or has that felt frustrating, or what does that look like for you guys on a
I think it's freeing, again, because when I think of if I ever convince myself that kind of my life is in my control, my 10-year plan, oh man, the decisions I make today affect my job, my career 5-10 years from now, that's exhausting too. And so just having the freedom to know, you know what, Lord, today, you've got today. I don't have to worry about today. I'm going to handle whatever you put right in front of me. That's easy to say. It's really trite. In fact, even listeners are like, okay, Brett, yeah, that's all well and good. I'm glad you can do that. I can't. It's a discipline.
Right.
It is, my mind wanders to the future, and I have to constantly pull myself back to, okay, today, Lord, today, on your strength, 24 hours at a time, on your strength, not on mine.
Yeah.
It's freeing. Because then tomorrow's not up to me.
Right.
When I had that reminder and that perspective, tomorrow's not up to me, which is awesome. Because then I don't have to worry about tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think until you're like forced into that place, it's hard to release it and let it go. But then it's like where you guys find yourself, it's like we don't have the choice. It's like even if we wanted to hold on to this sense of control, it's like not an option anymore, right? Which is like painful and really hard. But then I think also there is a lot of like freedom and good just from being able to go, okay, like I can do nothing at this point. So whatever this day or the next day holds, like we are just gonna have to trust in the Lord and on the firm foundation. But that's something we talk about a lot too, and especially with the families that we meet with, is just when we're forced there again, it's one of those like gifts that we're given from the Lord, but like nobody's like itching to like grasp for it, It's like you got that one, but once it's like, okay, this is all we have, then it's like, wow, this really is the way that the Lord created us to be as humans, is like to rely on him for the next 24 hours. So
And just another paradoxical idea that is like so richly rooted in the gospel, which is we talk often about joy and sorrow and how those things feel like opposites, but that they aren't mutually exclusive, that they can go hand in hand. And that Jesus embodied that better than anybody, as well as this idea of like freedom and surrender, which feel like opposite ideas. But it's when I do
sound trite, kind of like you said. It's
totally.
like when people say that, it's like, oh, okay, yeah,
put it on a
cute,
bumper sticker
but,
or something.
right.
But it's, you touched on, you said the word control, and that's where we don't even realize how controlling we are oftentimes until we're just totally stripped of any ability to make any choices and don't have a hand in the matter anymore. And so you're either gonna fall into despair at that moment, or you're gonna turn your eyes, as you read, Chrissy, and your hope and your perspective on to something or someone who does have control in the situation and who doesn't make mistakes. And even when we look at our lives and things just feel like gigantic mistakes, he's a redemptive God and he's a good God. And he's authoring all of our stories, good, bad, and ugly. And we have the ability to use our stories and in the midst of them point back to his ultimate story. And so thank you guys so much just for the way you've spurred us on and encouraged us and done that so beautifully, so humbly, and so authentically, not just today for 30 minutes, but for the last 5+ years of us getting to be friends with you. Can I throw a bonus question at you?
Yeah, come on.
Brett Billman, you were maybe the first phone call, or certainly one of the first phone calls when we were assembling a board of directors back in early 2018 for Able Speaks. You said yes. Spoiler alert.
You guys said yes.
Yes,
you
we
guys said
said
yes.
yes.
As a team.
Thank you for that correction.
Yeah.
Why yes, man? Why Able Speaks?
Yeah. You've said it multiple times, and I didn't even know, I wouldn't have been able to put these words to it, but I do remember one of the first meetings, sitting down in a tiny room, getting hot and sweaty, going through lots of discussions, having a whiteboard, figuring out, okay, how do we want to, what's the statement we want to use? What's the mission of this? And it's helping families find joy in the midst of sorrow. And for me, we had hit a turning point in our lives that you kind of have a fork in the road, an option of, am I going to choose to find joy in the midst of this sorrow, or am I just going to let this thing spiral me out of control? And being there for families, it's so important. We had people around us that helped point us to truth and being able to find joy. But without people around you, man, how easy that is for these life events to spiral you out of control, because they are, like I said earlier, when you think about them, it's debilitating. So there's such a need of, when life gets turned upside down, having other people rushing to your side and carrying you when you don't feel like you can take another step. And
you let us in a little bit earlier, of sharing getting a life-limiting diagnosis for Ellie of Turner syndrome, which just for context is, hey, the life expectancy and outlook, not good. And so as you're laying face down on the floor, punching the floor, I mean, that's our mission. Like that's our families, is as the people are receiving that news and having to process the implications of that news about moving forward, making that choice to move forward and strength and courage, first of all, and then doing so with support, with resources. I mean, it was something that obviously struck a chord in a more personal way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you had asked me to be on the board 2 months after we got the diagnosis that Ellie had Turner syndrome. We had since found out it was a false positive, but I remember that moment and thinking, man, if I can be in the room for somebody that gets that type of diagnosis, I want to be there. If Daniel can be in the room, if somebody from Able Speaks can be in the room or be a phone call away when you get that diagnosis, man, I'm so glad I had that. And I don't want other people to be deprived of that opportunity. So that was it.
Come on, brother.
That's awesome.
Well, we love you guys, and it's been a sweet thing not just to become dear friends, but also partners in ministry.
Yeah.
And so thank you guys for joining
thank you
us.
for having us.
For episode 2, we'll be back next week for episode 3 as we continue the Life Upside Down podcast. See you then.
This has been the Life Upside Down podcast, powered by Christian Parenting.
Our vision is that every parent and every person might experience hope and joy even in the midst of sorrow. If you found today's content helpful, we'd invite you to pass it along to a friend who might be encouraged as well.
You can find us at christianparenting.org/lifeupsidedown, and we hope you'll continue the journey with us in the weeks to come.
We'd also invite you to check out ablespeaks.org to learn more about the mission we've given our lives to. We'll see you next time.